And good evening, everyone. It's Gordon Cosby coming to you once again live and unscripted. This time I'm not alone. Besides Candy the Wonder Dog, who's beside me, as she always is, not getting a treat tonight. I didn't get one ready. No, you're not getting one. I usually start out giving her a treat. I have a gentleman from the great state of Texas who he and I went to school together back in grades 2, 3, and 4 in the small town of Glen Rock, New Jersey. David has lived all over the US in Rhode Island, in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Texas. I'm probably missing a few. He's been to Canada once for Expo and all the way back in 1967. He remembers it vividly, I'm sure. I was there as well. Don't remember a thing. At any rate, David, welcome to my live stream. Appreciate you coming on board.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. You want to give a brief introduction of yourself? I mean, David's an ordinary, average guy like myself. He works in the IT field, an avid diver, but fill in the blanks. Tell us a bit about yourself, your age, where you grew up, that kind of thing. Just general.
Oh, I'm 58. I was born in Providence, Rhode Island, one of the smallest states in the country. Um, as the parents moved, I moved along with them, and then after getting out of college and living in North Carolina, worked my way out of a job there in IT, and moved up to Pennsylvania in the area where I went to college, and then again worked my way out of a job and moved down. My parents had moved to Texas, and I had them sending me the want ads, and there was an opportunity to go work for a refining company down in Port Arthur, Texas, and then worked there for a couple of years, and then got wooed away by one of those big oil companies. I've been with them for now, coming up on 28 years.
Wow, 28 years with the same company?
Yep. And
That's not normal anymore.
no, but it essentially is golden handcuffs because I still have a real pension in addition to the 401k, the American Savings Plan that you can participate in, and profit sharing from the company.
Very
So,
good.
but
And now you said to me before we went live that you're, another how many years away from retirement?
about 5.5.
Five and a
So,
half. Okay. So you're going to
yeah,
get out around, you're going to get out before 65.
yeah, be 63 in a bit.
Okay. Yeah. David and I actually have not seen each other since I would guess sometime around 1978 when my family went back, when I was 12, 13 years of age, went back to New Jersey and for an event at the church we both attended, Community Church of Glen Rock. They were burning the mortgage,
Oh
and
yes.
we went down for a trip, and I went knocking on David's old door, and I don't think he recognized me. The first thing you said is, "You have long hair."
It happens.
And now neither of us has any hair.
Neither of us has to worry about that anymore.
And sadly, David unfortunately didn't have a camera with him where he is right now. Next time we do this, hopefully you have a camera.
Yep.
And well, we got a picture, good enough. Um, so, what are your thoughts on incredibly divisive figure, your president Donald Trump?
Oh, he's divisive to say the least. He's a what language level of language can we use on this thing?
You're free, free.
Okay.
This
Uh, he's an ass, but he is the solution to the deplorable state that the country was in. The progressivism and things of that nature were leading us down a terrible path, and it wasn't as much the president or the vice president; it was uh, the people they brought along that worked with them behind the scenes that were affecting policy and stuff. That they were really, how do you put this? Not really good at making international policy decisions. And we ended up with the
you're talking
situation,
about
both Ukraine and Yeah, mostly Ukraine, where you have the U.S. is a very weak president and vice president, and there was no Putin just could roll in there and knew nothing was going to happen to him because Biden was basically useless.
Now, where do you stand? What are your thoughts? What are your opinions on um, the situation in Ukraine? Are you sympathetic toward the Russians, sympathetic toward the Ukrainians, or a pox on both their houses? Or
Oh,
should
absolutely.
America step up and keep sending hundreds of billions of dollars? Or
Well,
go ahead.
absolutely sympathetic for the Ukrainians. But
Okay.
just after the Ukraine Russia war started, they had Bill Clinton on CNN, and he was talking about the situation in Ukraine and the Russian invasion. And he said it was a de facto, it was going to happen at some point. Because after the breakup of the Soviet Union, and you had all these countries created or whatever and recognized, Russia never recognized Ukraine as a sovereign country. They never signed that part of the treaty.
Okay.
So they were, in their thoughts, Ukraine is part of Russia still. And that's the way they looked at it. It's like, why are you arguing with us? That's part of our country, is the Russian philosophy. And
Right.
Clinton just laid it out. It's like it was just a matter of time whenever they were going to invade and try and take back what they believe is their country.
And there are a lot of ethnic Russians who live within the borders of what is called Ukraine, and certainly in Crimea
Hmm.
and in this Donbass region in the eastern part of the country, a lot of ethnic Russians, a lot of Russian speaking individuals who who knows, are they
Yeah,
more aligned with Russia or are they more aligned with Kiev?
yeah. I mean, just as a family example, Dad's mother was born in Romania in 1903.
Okay,
And in her lifetime, that town was in three countries: before World War One, after World War One, and then after World War Two.
right. What was it before World War One? It was part of the old Austrian Hungarian Empire.
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Okay,
So,
and then
but
after World War One, it became Hungary.
more than likely, or whatever, it moved around. Whoever won that part of the war in that area held the territory. So
Right.
this is nothing new.
Yeah, and the hatreds that exist in Eastern Europe, they go back generations, and they're based on territory, they're based on ethnicity, they're based on language, can be based on religion, and the hatreds go back hundreds of years.
Yeah, if not more even.
Yeah,
So
and we
I'm not surprised, but it's and we have, as a Western population or whatever, Western philosophy, we try to all get along. Well, the Slavic viewpoint of the world is not a Western philosophy.
no.
So applying our average North American viewpoints on things, there's no representation to that or nothing that's similar to, say, a Russian viewpoint.
We have Danny who's in Montreal. He's writing on the chat. You can see it on the screen. Isn't Ukraine considered the breadbasket of Russia?
It's the breadbasket of that whole area. Tremendous amount of agriculture comes out of Ukraine.
Yeah, especially grain.
Yes.
And I was somewhat surprised when the war broke out. I thought there was going to be an even larger impact than there was on things like bread, pasta, anything that's made with grain. And there was an impact, but it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, Russia's first goal with Crimea was to get a water port.
Right, the Black Sea.
Yes, they couldn't get to that without taking over a piece of territory.
Right on. Um, Now, let's transition and move forward to 2024, your election of November.
Hmm.
Now you have Donald Trump in the White House. You're down in about as red a state as you can get. Although you're close to Houston, you're
Oh
part of
yes,
the Houston,
yeah, yeah.
and there's very much a rural urban divide politically in the United States. Same here in Canada.
Hmm.
And the urban centers tend to be far more progressively oriented than the boondocks. What's your sense? Read of the sticking your finger in the air and gauging the wind. What's it
Yeah.
like in and around your area of Houston?
Houston tends to be, well, Houston is definitely Democratic or blue overall. You do get out of the cities and stuff. It is very right wing Republican as far as that. Very, I was going to say, I don't want to put in the word church going on that because most of my friends I would classify as libertarian,
Okay,
and uh, and it can be extremely religious and have a lot of religious strong viewpoints. But it's a mixed bag in Texas. But you have a majority of people that will vote Republican versus Democratic or progressive.
okay. Democratic or progressive? What are
Well, you've got a lot of people that will either classify them as progressives. They'll caucus with the Democrats, but they'll say
okay?
that they're progressives or democratic socialists.
Okay. Yeah, because I tend to look at your politics in the United States as very much being a binary choice. You're either going Republican or Democrat, but you're
Well,
just saying it.
there's a lot more variety, but of people's philosophies, but you're pretty much stuck with a binary set of choices to vote for. So I
So you're
mean,
saying that within the umbrella of the Democratic Party, that doesn't mean they're all like-minded on every single issue, obviously. Same with the Republicans.
exactly.
Okay.
So um, I can honestly say every election I've done since my first one for Ronald Reagan back in '88,
80.
I'd say was voting for the lesser of the two evils.
Do you
I've never
mind
really. Hmm?
do you mind sharing where your sympathies lay in this most recent election?
Oh, I voted for Trump. I have no uh, qualms about saying that's where my uh, choice had to be made, uh,
Okay.
because I could see how poor Biden was, and the media in the U.S. was lying about it, and the people that worked around him lied about it, and Harris was thoroughly incompetent. I mean, I would make a terrible president. I do not have the level of memory to retain all these leaders' names and all the things that are going on. And she couldn't have a calm conversation with a talk show host and be articulate.
Right. Oh,
And it's like, how do you expect somebody like that to go off and negotiate with people that are skilled tacticians? I mean, I watched Margaret Thatcher years ago on a TV show, and they tried to get her in a catch 22 about Churchill. And it's like, the woman was sharp. I mean, just unbelievable sharp. And Harris has none of those qualities.
right. Well, right now, what's happening in Canada is massive news because Donald Trump is he keeps threatening Canada with huge tariffs,
Hmm.
and then he pulls back and gives a pause. 25% tariffs are coming into effect apparently April 2nd, but however, they were supposed to already be in place, but he just announced a pause and they're going to come in April 2nd, but who knows, maybe something will happen and it will get pushed down again. But it has Canadians now puffing up our chests, and we've got t-shirts and hats that say elbows up,
Yeah.
a
Can I ask a
hockey.
leading can I ask a leading question?
You
I
may.
know Trudeau is still in power at the moment. When is his transition?
Well, they just tonight announced that Mark Carney, who is the former governor of the Bank of Canada, former governor of the Bank of England, and then later uh, he moved to New York and started working at the UN as a top advisor, focusing on climate change, which is my least favorite topic in the world. Uh, and now he has just been elected leader of the Liberal Party, and he will be transitioning and becoming our next prime minister. Probably in another week or two. I'm still waiting to hear the details now that Mark Carney won the leadership. Now Trudeau has to formally resign his leadership of the party and hand leadership over to Mark Carney. And in our Westminster system of parliamentary democracy, whoever is the leader of the party with the most seats automatically becomes prime minister.
Okay. I have a feeling that, sorry for the long-winded drag that out process there,
No,
that Trump was waiting that process out.
you think so?
It would seem very likely to get somebody in that is willing to have a discussion.
I disagree. I genuinely disagree. I don't think it matters to Trump whether it's Mark Carney, Justin Trudeau, or Pierre Poilievre, who's the leader of what we call a Conservative Party of Canada. And there are, you're Republican Democrat in Canada, the only two parties that have ever governed are the Liberals and the Conservatives.
Hmm.
It's one or the other. And I frankly don't think that Donald Trump really cares whether it's the Liberals or the Conservatives, whether it's Trudeau or Carney or Pierre Poilievre. I think he is looking out for American interests, and he is looking to revive, say, your steel industry. And he's talking about drill, baby, drill,
Hmm.
and which is your industry, by the way. You're working for an energy company, are you not?
Yes, yeah. Well, I'm at
Yeah.
the what they call downstream. We make plastics out of the leftovers from refining.
Okay. Yeah. That's something people often don't realize is when you take a barrel of oil, yeah, a portion of that makes gas, and then there are all kinds of what do they call them? Petroleum products,
Yeah, yeah.
latex, and goodness
Well,
knows.
now you've seen the big thick blue water pipe along the side of the road for water pipes and stuff.
Yep.
That's one of the type of products that we make. It's the
Yeah.
long term, bury it in the ground, and it's going to provide you water service for the next 200 years.
And that 200 years will come.
Oh yes, oh yes.
It'll have to be replaced at some point. But
Okay.
what's the word I'm looking for? There's a word for it, for something petroleum products.
Oh, I think you're pretty. I mean, it's a petroleum product or some sort of a derivative.
Yeah, there's a term for that.
It
But
depends on how green you are.
well, at any rate, Canada, we send down pretty much all our oil
Mhm.
that comes from Alberta's oil sands. We send it down to, I think it's Louisiana, to be refined
Actually, it
because,
goes to Port Arthur, the plant I used to work for, which is now part of Valero,
okay.
receives oil directly from Canada through a pipeline.
And is that the heavy, thick tar sands oil?
Yep, heavy sour crude.
Yeah, because they call it light sweet crude when it's coming from the Brent Sea or wherever, and it's very easily refinable. And from what I understand, I guess that's so Port Arthur, we're in Texas, they have built refineries specific to heavy sour Canadian crude from the tar sands.
Well, Texas crude is heavy and sour.
Oh, it is as well.
Yeah, and the refinery in Port Arthur was actually the original Gulf refinery from what 1905.
Okay.
So it was always built around what they call West Texas Intermediate.
WTI, yeah.
Yep. And so, but they also built it to handle the heavy sour stuff.
Okay. Because from what I understand, that is pretty much the only facility in the world that can process Canadian tar sand oil
It's
into
one of
gas.
those. It's one of those. There's a lot of refineries that are built around that in Texas.
Okay. In Canada, I do not believe that we have the refining capacity for our own oil. And so it's all gets sent down to Texas. And now there's going to be a 10% tariff placed on that oil.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's what Trump has announced, a 10%, 25% across the board, but for oil and energy, 10%. And so the your employer, any refinery bringing in Canadian oil, will have to pay the Canadian supplier, and then they'll have to pay an additional 10% tariff to the US federal government, to Washington.
Hmm.
And there's talk that it is going to be very inflationary for you guys, and kind of running counter to what Trump had promised. He promised he was going to get rid of Bidenflation, and
Yeah.
now is there much talk in and around where you live about inflation, about the prospect that placing these tariffs is going to be inflationary on US consumers?
Yes. There's a lot of concern about that because just the price of food and other things over the last, say, 3 to 4 years has been so bad that anything adding on to it is questionable at best.
Well, my impression from this side of the border, and I've said as much in previous live streams, is that my suspicion is that Trump has a lot of what is referred to as political capital, a lot of goodwill, a lot of people who are willing to say, well, I still support him. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. What's your sense? What's your take? Do you get that impression? Or do you think people are more on an edge and they'll turn on him more easily?
No, he's got a lot of political clout, and you have a lot of um, people that were uh, doubting him in his first term, and I think after 4 years of the disaster we had, they're willing to let him do what he needs to do, or what you think he needs to do at the moment.
And do you think
So,
there's anything that could, crack when do you think cracks would start to appear in the MAGA wall? What would it take?
uh, I think it's going to be runaway inflation or a higher level of inflation than they expect. It's this fine line between tariffs and growth in the economy. If you have growth in the economy and you have a shift to domestic production, you're not going to get uh, the raise in cost in goods. If everything still needs to be, and this is supposition on my part about the Trump and what his folks are trying to get done. It's where's that shift? I mean, it's been what, 60 days?
April 30th, I think, is his 100-day mark.
Right. So there's been a lot happening in 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, it's he's been moving at breakneck speed. It's over 100 executive orders signed, and a couple hundred more executive actions that don't exactly fall under the rubric of a executive order, but they're still,
Right. He told people
100.
that work for him to do it.
Yeah, and it's got to be. I mean, how did you feel about Trump's declaration that, on the gender ideology front, on the whole transgender, ideology front, and now he's, stated that in the United States we only recognize two genders. It's binary, it's male and female.
Right. And from a governmental standpoint,
Yeah.
the government has to make a decision. It's like when you're dealing here with OSHA, Occupational Health and Safety Administration, everything has to be in English at a minimum, just like you have English and French. You have two languages that have to be written, that the government says this is what you communicate in. The government has to, they can't conform to the, I don't know what somebody said, 130 possible genders or something like that.
In Canada, they literally say in government documentations, they list out the full alphabet soup acronym,
Mm-hmm.
and then they say plus an unlimited number of other potential genders. Like they
Right.
literally say in government documentation that the number of genders is unlimited.
Yeah. I mean, you can call yourself a table lamp. Just don't expect me to believe it.
You
Or
can, you
force
know,
me
you,
to, yeah, or force me into a situation where I have to take that as blind truth.
now Airworks 07 has put up a comment that I've populated to the screen. And I don't know whether Airworks is male or female, but I'm going to say he for now because that's most of my viewers are male. I wish Trump would understand that he is helping the liberals with all of these tariffs. What has happened in Canada is that because the liberals are governing, they're still the governing party. So they're responding to the tariffs and our problem, this elbows up and talking tough, and we're gonna hit the Americans back hard. And we didn't start this fight, but we're gonna end it. Oh, the rhetoric is unreal. And by and large, Canadians are responding to it.
Mm-hmm.
They like the tough talk. And the liberal fortunes in the polls, which 3 months ago, the liberals were at 20%. Now they're getting up in around 35, maybe 40, and that's enough to win an election in our country because we have more than just two parties. We have Liberal, Conservative, NDP, Socialist, Bloc Québécois, Green, and one called the People's Party of Canada. And so in our legislative assembly, we have five in our parliament building, in our House of Commons, we have five parties
Yeah.
that are sitting.
It's easier to fight a common enemy.
Yeah, oh yeah, they're rallying the team and
Yes.
join Team Canada.
Mm-hmm. See,
And the our parliament right now is suspended, so the liberals are getting all the airtime. They're getting all the focus because there's no question period, there's no debate. It's just it's annoying as hell for a Canadian who is tired of liberal ideology, which we've been living with for the last 10 years.
yeah.
Uh, but in Texas, in Houston area, Galveston, where you are, how much are people talking about Canada and the tariff situation? How aware? I mean, before we went live, David was saying,
It's minimal.
yeah, you're closer to Mexico, far closer to Mexico than Canada.
Yeah, I mean, your comment about the tariffs on the oil sands coming down, that's going to be the biggest point of discussion because
Okay,
that's the main item from Canada that would affect the Texas economy.
right.
And if that oil is competitive with other imports or local, it's a moot point. If it's all coming in, and if I can buy a barrel of oil for $100, whether it comes out of Mexico or if it comes out of Canada, it doesn't matter to the overall cost.
Right.
And if, like, West Texas Intermediate um, years ago was about $35 in raw cost to produce.
Okay.
So the average person pulling it out of the ground is going to make about $60 a barrel on it, selling it.
Okay.
So it depends on what the profit margins are and what the people selling it are going to do. I mean, if Mexico wants to underbid Canada, they may take out some of their profit and said, all right, it's going to cost us another $10 to send that oil into the States. We'll only sell it for $90. Whereas if Canada's trying to sell it for 100 and you get a 10% markup, it's 110. So you can get competition going between Canada and Mexico.
Right.
I mean, who's
And,
going to
and, and it's a net benefit for the United States.
exactly? So
So,
it is some competition and things like that. So it is very capitalistic, but it is very a brutal way to do things.
now, down in Texas, I mean, gonna go back a couple years, did you get a lot of coverage? Were you paying attention down there yourself personally, or others, when the trucker convoy was going on in Ottawa?
Heard a bunch about that. Very disgusted, I think is the right word for it, that the government would seize protesters' assets, if I understand that correctly.
Yes.
That that would be uh, unconstitutional in the United States, unlawful seizure of assets.
Yeah, in your
No,
country, not in mine.
yeah. So I mean, it's the whole concept was abhorrent.
Uh,
I mean,
It
you
was
have the right to protest and stuff. I mean, you can say almost anything you want, but outside of yelling fire in a movie theater. Uh, but as long as you're not hurting anybody in the process, you can say what you want.
in your country.
Yeah. Oh, trust me, I've seen that. Same thing goes on over in England where you've got censorship and other things.
Yeah, and we have a bill that got stalled after Trudeau resigned. They suspended our parliament, the fancy term called prorogation. And so Parliament is suspended. And with that suspension, a piece of legislation called the Online quote unquote harms bill died for now. It's
Hmm.
not dead, it just got pushed to the side. They can't move forward on it. And what they want to do, what the Liberals are proposing, is to impanel a group of unelected officials who will, if I feel like I've been harmed by something online, I would then launch a formal complaint. Dave down in Texas said he hurt my feelings. I've been harmed. And
Yes.
then they could, take action against you or whoever, not you, because you're in Texas and you're protected by the First Amendment, which we don't have here in Canada. And I could face penalties for
Mhm.
harming someone, hurting their feelings.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
And being a
The
member like yourself of Generation X,
Yep.
um, not overly concerned about the other person's feelings. Uh,
Oh man. Now, how do you feel as we're two Gen X guys? And on this channel, I often refer to myself as the poster child, old child, for cancel culture. Because, and it certainly plays out this way in Canada. If you want a seat at the table, if you want your voice to be heard, you have to be an Aboriginal female with a disability and transgender. Then
yes.
your opinion gets heard. But with me, I'm old, white, Christian, male, straight. Oh, sorry, shut up, boomer. Even though I'm not a boomer, that you just sit down and shut up. And you and I are pretty much the exact same age. How do you know there's never been a Gen X president?
Not yet. Not even a vice president.
No,
Yep. But
like
because Vance is a millennial.
how old is he?
Oh, he's got to be
40,
40 something.
42?
Yeah, yeah. So he's a millennial. But it's ironic the conversation you had here, and I just had this conversation a couple of weeks ago with my boss,
Yes.
and we've got all these specialty groups at work to encourage. A lot of it's for new hires and things like that, and but they cater to all the different ethnic groups, including former military, alternative lifestyle, what have you. And my boss was on our upcoming evaluations for the new year that we need to participate in some of these things. And they said, "Do you realize myself and one other person in the department are the old white guys that we aren't represented by any of those special interest groups that you just named. We are exclusively removed from those groups. I mean, it is essentially it's racism with more steps.
I like that. I like that. I'm going to borrow that. Racism with more steps. Racism and discrimination.
Yes.
Um, because I find it so interesting. Our generation is somewhat unique in that now you work in the IT field,
Yes.
and so we've got a hand in we've got a foot in two different camps. We've got a bit of a foot in the millennial camp, but we did grow up before the internet, before technology became so ubiquitous.
Hmm.
And now, so we grew up going around on our banana seat bicycles and, jumping things and, digging holes in your backyard, like we
Yeah.
were back in New Jersey, digging down to China or whatever we were doing.
Yep. Come back when the streetlights come on.
Yeah, that old world. But we also, in and around the age of 30, we also were early adopters of this new technology that we're using right now.
Oh yeah.
And so we got a foot in the camp of our parents and a foot in the camp of the generation that came after us, the millennials. And so you would think it would gives us we would be a bridge to the two, and yet rather than being a bridge, we're just being pushed aside completely.
We're not a large enough population to be a factor in anybody's decision.
It's a good point.
We don't vote enough to make a difference.
We do vote, I think, in large numbers, probably,
Right.
but we're not a big demographic.
That's it. Yeah, that's what I should say. The Gen X demographic is too small to be significant.
Yeah, so we don't have to cater to them. We need the millennials, we need the boomers or zoomers or whatever name they go with.
And I don't know if we
Uh,
need the boomers.
well, see, I like my age 58. Whatever age I am, the front end of the baby boom is 20 years my senior.
Hmm.
So the front end of the baby boom is 78.
Well, actually, no. Didn't it start in
Yeah.
45? Yeah, it was 20 years. Sorry.
Yeah, 40, 45, 46.
Yeah.
So I take my age, 58, 59, so the boomers are crowding 80 years of age. And the average life expectancy is somewhere in around 80. So the impact of the boomers is waning because they're
Yes.
dying off. But they are still around.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. And my parents are the silent generation from the 30s. So
yeah, mine as well. Although David's fortunate, both his parents, who I remember, are still around, and they even remember me. I was probably as obnoxious a guy back then in 1973, 4 as I am now.
I'll plead the fifth.
What do you remember? I mean, what do you remember? What was I like?
Oh, I don't know. Everybody was just a normal kid back then. You didn't worry about any of this foolishness.
All I know is David and I were big. David was huge into model building,
Yep.
uh, Godzilla and whatever.
Yep.
Models were huge.
I still do
And
model trains.
oh, very good. And the other thing you were into, and I as well, the two of us would sit down and binge watch the monster movies.
Absolutely.
That was massive. And now, did you watch Wonderama Saturday mornings, Sunday mornings?
Ooh. Sounds familiar. I
Bob
think
Mc,
yeah, it doesn't ring a bell at the moment.
okay, Bob McAllister, Kids Are People Too, Win a 3-speed bicycle.
Nope.
Okay, it was The Price is Right for kids.
Okay.
Yeah, I used to watch that. Used to watch Zoom. Do you watch Zoom?
Zoom a little bit, but there are a couple others in the New York area. What was it? The Magic Garden,
Okay,
and there were a couple other ones, other local shows of the New York stations, because you got so many stations being in New York at the time,
right.
or out of the New
Well,
York
yeah,
area.
Wonderama, the Price is Right for the Kids. That was a New York City station, and I actually won a ticket to be on the show and part in the studio
Oh,
audience with the potential to get picked. But it was the same day as my Cub Scout troop was having the Cub car races.
oh,
And my dad had spent 4 or 5 hours making a beautiful little Cub car, and there was no way we were going to skip out on those races, and he wasn't going to go without me. You were a Cub Scout, weren't you?
no. My brother got into Weeblos.
I don't even know what Weeblos is.
I think that's for the kids that are younger than you have to be in the Scouts. But
Okay.
and there was a big thing at Coleman School on a drive to get kids into Scouts, and they had all sorts of demonstration stuff set up. And one of them was those inflatable boxing gloves, and put them on. You're gonna go lightly with some other kid. Well, the other kid's glove wasn't inflated properly,
Oh no.
and I got popped in the nose hard. And at that
And you
moment,
were
said,
not
I was not interested in the Cub Scouts from ever since that point.
you were not a big kid as I remember.
No, no, skinny little sucker.
Yeah, you were a skinny little guy. So was I.
Yeah, I mean, even in college, sophomore year, I think I was still like 135 pounds.
Oh wow. Now I grew. I grew. I'm like now. How tall are you now?
5'10".
Okay, so we're similar. I didn't quite make it to 6 feet. I got to 5 foot 11 3/4, and you know, big enough.
Big enough,
But
exactly.
it's been great catching up with you. I'm going to wrap this up now, if that's all right. But
No problem.
as a final word, what are your thoughts, your own personal thoughts on my station? We talk a lot about the globalist agenda, WEF. Um, do you follow that much? The World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, Agenda 2030, the Great Reset. Do any of these things resonate with you?
Some of the Great Reset and things like that came out of Davos
Yeah.
and those areas or whatever. Um, I I am, let's see. I I'm not an isolationist by any stretch of the imagination, but I have seen what various governments have done over the years with quantitative easing to bring all the currencies essentially into the same valuation between US, Canada, England, Euro, are all within pennies of each other on a regular basis.
Not our Canadian dollar right now. It's only worth in and around 60 cents to a US dollar.
Oh, okay. Because for a while there, I mean, it was darn close. But when years ago, when I went over to Europe,
Yeah.
it was basically 2 to 1.
Yeah.
And
10 years,
even, yeah,
10,
10 years
10
later,
years, yeah. 10 years ago, before Justin Trudeau became Prime Minister of Canada, the Canadian dollar was close to parity with it was pennies
yes,
difference. And in terms of GDP per person, per capita GDP, we were almost at complete parity with the United States.
yeah. So there's been that World Economic Forum and those organizations have been working extremely hard to, without changing people's currency, they have changed people's currency.
Well, Canadians are a lot poorer. Uh, at any rate, I'm going to leave it there and thank everyone for watching. If you haven't subscribed to my channel and you enjoyed this and you like some of my previous content, I'll be doing more lives talking about the political situation in Canada, digging into what's coming with Mark Carney. When will he take up residence in the Prime Minister's office? We don't know yet. Maybe we do. Maybe while David and I have been talking, maybe something has come down the pike. I don't know, but we'll find out. We'll find out when the next election in Canada is coming. Probably with it. My guess is within weeks. So I like to end my. I haven't mentioned David. David, I still go to church. Do you?
No, not on a regular basis now.
Okay. Do you call yourself a Christian?
Mm, not really.
Okay. I do. I do call myself a Christian. Uh, a flawed, incredibly flawed one, but I like to end my streams with a blessing out of the book of Numbers, where Aaron is speaking over God's covenant chosen people, and the words he speaks are, may the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you, and may the Lord grant you peace. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and we'll see y'all the next time.
Take care.